The fires of many battles still burned across faraway worlds when humanity arrived. The rulers of the hunt gathered in high halls, dressed in armor and jewels, declaring once again that no one could stand against them. They had been certain of their place for centuries. Each year they fought their great contest, a test of strength and power, where the finest men and women from every house showed their skills. It was not simply a game. It was how they claimed the right to rule, how they decided who stood at the highest seat. The hunt was blood, war, and pride. When the messengers first announced that a small and unknown people from a forgotten planet had arrived to join the hunt,
most of the gathering laughed.
They looked across their shining chamber and wondered, had desperation truly grown so low that outsiders would attempt to take part? These humans, with their simple ships and plain armor, seemed weak to their eyes. The laughter rolled along the walls and filled the air like thunder. No one believed the humans could last even a single round of combat, yet the human queen entered the hall without fear. Alexandra Kane wore no gown of silk and no crown of gems. Her crown was a ring of tempered steel, hammered by hands that had worked through storms and hardships. Her robe was a uniform scarred from war on Earth. She had crossed dark space not to kneel but to stand as equal. Her eyes, gray and steady, cut deep into the smug faces that turned toward her. Where they carried history of ritual, she carried history of survival. Every famine, every plague, every war that had almost broken humanity now lived in her gaze. Behind her came the first strike teams. Matthew Clark, a young pilot with restless eyes, stood firm at her left. He had never accepted defeat, not in his years as a soldier in the skies above his homeworld, and not here before these mighty houses. His jaw was clenched, his hand tight on the grip of his rifle, though he kept it lowered. At her right stood Laura Hall, an engineer with rough gloves patched from long labor. She had built weapons out of scraps, walls out of rubble, and hope out of ashes. She smiled when she heard the laughter, though her smile was sharp. She whispered with dry humor that arrogance was the first step toward losing. The rulers mocked the group as they passed. They leaned over from their seats and threw words heavy with scorn, asking what kind of children would dare walk among them. Alexandra never turned her head. She carried herself with the calm of someone who had already faced death many times and found no reason to fear it again. Each step she took along the stone floor sounded louder than the laughter above. Each moment stretched into silence until the room felt unsettled by her very presence. The great announcer called across the hall that the hunt would begin on the jungle moon at dawn. Every house would send their banners, every warrior their best. The test would last until only one force remained standing. Alexandra nodded once, as though the matter was decided long before she arrived. Humanity had not come for second place. They had not come to entertain the rulers with a foolish attempt. They had come to claim the hunt itself. As she turned away from the chamber, Matthew looked across the open floor toward ranks of armored champions, who stared back with mock smiles. He knew many of them saw him already as prey. Laura walked at his side and said that their enemies did not yet understand. The hunt was not about who roared the loudest, it was about who survived at the end. Survival was the art humanity knew best. The queen heard her words and only gave a quiet nod, for she already believed the same. The dawn came heavy with smoke and heat as the contest began on the jungle moon. The air was thick with the smell of wild soil and sharp leaves. The ground was uneven and covered with vines. Old ruins rose from the mist like broken towers. Bones of many past warriors lay scattered where the hunt had stained the land again and again. It was here that the new fighters came down from the sky and prepared for battle. From the ships of the great houses poured men and women dressed in bright armor and carrying heavy weapons. They walked with the pride of people certain of their power. They howled and sang of their victories. Every step they took struck the ground like a drumbeat of confidence. In their eyes, humanity was just a weak shadow among them, no more than prey that could be crushed under their weight. The ships of Earth landed quietly. No songs greeted their arrival. No grand banners waved in the air. The human soldiers stepped down with rifles held steady, their faces calm. They understood they had no allies here. They understood this ground would accept only the strong, and the weak would stay forever among the bones. Alexandra Kane walked at the front of her soldiers. Her steel crown shone under the light, but her voice was simple when she gave her order. She told her people to remember their training, to trust one another, and to carry the spirit of Earth like a blade. Matthew Clark led the first strike team through the broken ruins. His eyes moved fast, reading the paths through the vines and crumbling walls. He kept his body close to the ground. Unlike the proud warriors who announced themselves with shouting, Matthew whispered short commands, and his team obeyed in silence. In his mind, he remembered old lessons from Earth. Humanity had learned to hunt with traps and tricks when they had little strength against beasts that were far larger. That lesson had never been forgotten. Laura Hall brought machines with her. They seemed small and plain compared to the towering suits of other warriors. She unfolded slender drones from her pack, each shaped with blades thin as knives. They climbed the ruins like spiders, silent and quick. She smiled as she checked her screen and whispered that height always belonged to the clever, never to the loud. The enemy came fast. A squad of armored champions entered the ruins with laughter, their swords flashing bright as the morning sun. They shouted to one another that they would tear through the humans before the day reached its first hour. Their leader pointed at Matthew and called him a target to be broken in sight of all. But Matthew and his squad vanished behind walls, moving like water through cracks. When the warriors rushed forward, the ground answered with sudden fire. Traps placed in silence tore the path apart. Smoke rose, and from within it, the humans struck at angles no one expected. The proud leader demanded a fair duel, but Matthew gave no answer. This was not a game of honor. This was war. When the smoke cleared, the champions lay silent on the field, their boasts smothered in ash. Laura's drones returned to her hands, their duty complete. The jungle rang with the sudden quiet that follows victory. From the shadows, Alexandra watched and raised her chin. She knew the world had just seen the first crack in the wall of pride that had stood for centuries. The other houses watching from the high stands grew restless. They had believed humanity would break in the first clash. Now they saw a different truth. The Queen's armies fought with a mind and spirit no boast could defeat. Where others sought glory, humans sought survival. Where others believed in ritual, humans believed in victory. And it was only the beginning. The Great Hall of Rulers burned with voices after the first clash was over. Many who had once mocked the humans now spoke in whispers, their pride shaken. They had seen soldiers from Earth win against trained champions, and the sight of it lingered like an unwelcome truth. Yet most still refused to believe humanity could continue past the first victory. To them it was only luck, nothing more. Alexandra Kane stood upon the cold floor and faced the circle of rulers. She did not bow or lower her eyes. The crown of iron rested firmly upon her head, and her uniform carried the marks of long marches and hard days. She was not covered in jewels, but every scar on her garment spoke of reality. She listened as one ruler after another declared that the hunt was sacred and would not be ruined by her kind. With calm, she answered that the hunt was already ruined by false honor and empty pride. The hunt was not about chance or crowns. The hunt had always been about survival. Those who could not endure should not claim mastery. Her words hung in the chamber like a blade, and though many spat back arguments, none could deny that silence followed her voice. Outside the chamber, Matthew Clark prepared the next squads. His hands were steady as he tightened the straps of his armor and checked his rifle. Around him stood soldiers who shared the same fire in their eyes. They were not lifted by the songs of fanfare, they were lifted by resolve. Each man and woman understood that the jungle moon would not show mercy to anyone, and that every step forward might be their last, yet none drew back. Laura Hall sat by the campfire with a small screen in her lap. Her drones, marked with fading scratches, rested beside her. She tapped commands into them with quick fingers, watching as their legs curled and their blades glistened clean. She thought about Earth and the long line of people who had built tools with bare hands when nothing was given to them. That memory gave her strength. She told Matthew with a grin that the rulers had not yet seen what true machines of survival could do. When Alexandra joined the camp, the soldiers rose. She looked into their faces, one by one, and she saw not fear, but determination. She told them that the day ahead would test not only their bodies, but their spirit. The rulers believed humanity would break once greater challenges came. She declared that the rulers did not know human history. She reminded them of storms survived, of sickness endured, of wars fought when there was nothing left but hope. The soldiers listened in silence. When she finished, they stood straighter, ready for what dawn would demand. The second day of the hunt began with thunder and fire. War drums shook the air, and new waves of armored enemies entered the jungle. The jungle moon shivered with the sound of pounding boots and shouted commands. Alexandra's forces did not march in glory. They spread into the torn ruins and vanished like hunters of old. Matthew led his team along the eastern wall where shattered stone leaned against twisted vines. High above, banners waved as the enemy charged in full lines, sure of their triumph. Matthew narrowed his gaze, then he signaled, and the ground erupted with hidden charges. The vines that had seemed quiet now snapped like whips as Laura's drones came alive, diving from above. The enemy moved with strength, but the battlefield itself had been reshaped into a net of traps. When the clash ended, smoke rose high, and once again human forces stood where no one expected them to. The calm discipline of Earth's fighters left the rulers unsettled. In the Great Hall, Alexandra returned and gave no boast. She gave only truth. Humanity was not here to play at honor. Shh. Humanity was here to win. Night fell hard over the jungle moon. The ruins turned black, and the heavy trees looked like towers of shadow. The air grew colder, and the sounds of insects and distant beasts filled the silence. Fires from the earlier battles crackled among the broken stones, and the ground was littered with wreckage. The second phase of the hunt was about to begin, and many of the great houses believed that humans would not last till morning. Alexandra Kane moved through the dark with her crown hidden under a hood. She did not need to show her status to her soldiers. She walked among them as one of their own. Her voice was calm but firm as she gave her orders. She told them the night belonged not to the loud, but to those who embraced silence. She reminded them that survival at night had always been part of the human story, from campfires of the old world to the front lines of their wars. Matthew Clark prepared his squad in the shadows of a collapsed tower. He checked his rifle again and gave each soldier a few short words. He told them to trust their training, to remember their movements, and to breathe steadily no matter what came. His voice carried no fear. His heart was steady because he knew that the darkness was not a threat to humans, but a companion they had lived with since the beginning. Laura Hall crouched near a ridge of stone and unfolded her drones. Their small lights flickered once before fading into black, ready to move unseen. She whispered that in the dark every noise carried a warning, and she told her machines to become the wind on the walls. Her gloved hands moved quickly as she set them loose, and soon they vanished above the battlefield. The first attack came without warning. A line of warriors from the houses stormed through the ruins, carrying blades that glowed red in the night. They shouted loudly, thinking their power alone would scatter the humans, but the dark became the shield of the human soldiers. Hidden in corners and shadows, they watched their enemies move deeper into the ruins without knowing where the danger waited. Matthew gave the signal. Gunfire cracked through the night like lightning. From three sides at once, his squad struck, their shots swift and controlled. When the warriors tried to charge, hidden traps came alive. The ground burst open in fire, and the ruins shook with the blast. Dazed and scattered, they stumbled into the lines of riflemen who finished the fight with precision. On the western path, Laura's machines struck from above. Blades tore through armor, and explosions lit the night in sharp flashes. Her drones moved fast, like darts of steel, striking again before anyone could react. When one was caught and destroyed, she did not frown. She ordered the rest to attack harder, and soon the path was blocked with wreckage and fire. In the distance, Alexandra stood on a rise, watching the spread of battle. Her face was calm, though the night roared with noise. She raised her hand and other squads moved forward, circling their enemies like hunters circling prey. The rulers had expected chaos, but instead they saw discipline and control. The humans avoided direct charges, striking where the enemy was weak and vanishing before they could be caught. When the night reached its deep hours, the ruins were silent again. Fires smoldered in the rubble and bodies lay among the vines. The humans moved back to their camps with order, carrying their wounded and supporting one another with steady hands. Alexandra walked among them, offering a brief word to each group, her eyes showing both pride and resolve. Far away, the rulers in the high halls grew uneasy. This was not the way the hunt was supposed to unfold. They had expected the humans to fall by this stage, broken in the dark like all newcomers before them. Instead, The humans had turned the night into a weapon, and their methods left no question. They were not guests anymore, were hunters. The sun rose through the smoke of battle and cast long shadows across the jungle moon. The final day of the hunt had arrived. All who still lived gathered near the ruins where the last trial would be decided. The ground was stained with fire and blood. Its broken armor and shattered weapons told the story of the days before. Now, only a few forces remained, and among them stood the humans. Many rulers had sworn that these newcomers would never last, yet they were still there, steady and unbroken. Alexandra Kane stood at the front of her soldiers. A crown of steel caught the morning light as she lifted her head. Around her, men and women straightened their backs with strength born not from pride, but from will. Matthew Clark checked his rifle one last time, his jaw tight with determination. Laura Hall polished the edges of her drones and looked at her queen with confidence. Every human on the field knew that this day would decide everything. Trumpets from the high stands called the start of the last trial. The ground trembled as the strongest surviving champions marched forward. They wore bright armor and carried heavy blades, charging with roars meant to terrify. The rulers who watched from above shouted and cheered for them, certain that their display of power could crush the humans at last. Alexandra raised one hand, and her soldiers moved silently into position. The first clash came with a deafening sound as the armored champions charged. But instead of standing in an open line, the humans scattered into the ruins and shadows. Gunfire burst from hidden places. Traps lit the ground on fire. Drones from Laura's pack swarmed from the air and slashed into enemy ranks.
Matthew
Led his squad in a swift strike across the flank, cutting deep into the line and pulling back before his foes could trap him. The champions tried again and again, but each charge was broken. Their strength met only smoke, iron, and relentless fire. Alexandra moved forward step by step, her voice steady and sharp as she gave commands. She did not shout. She guided every soldier like a hand guiding the blade of a knife. Wherever the enemy turned, the humans were already there, waiting to strike. The field soon fell quiet as the champions staggered. One by one, they dropped their weapons in defeat or were forced to the ground. When the last fell, silence spread across the battlefield. The humans, tired and wounded but alive, stood victorious in the center of the ruins. Smoke curled into the air above them, and the light of dawn seemed brighter than before. From the high stands came no cheers now. The rulers did not cry out for glory. They watched in silence as Alexandra Kane walked to the very heart of the field. She took her crown from her head and raised it high for all to see. Her voice carried across the broken stone as she declared that the hunt no longer belonged only to the loud or the proud. It belonged to those who endured and overcame. It belonged to those who survived when all hope was gone. By that right, humanity had claimed victory. Matthew knelt with his rifle resting against the ground. Laura bowed her head and touched the dirt with her hand. Behind them, every soldier lowered their weapons in respect to their queen. Alexandra turned to them, her eyes firm and strong, and told them they had changed the course of history forever. The rulers had no words left. They had seen the truth on the battlefield. They had seen humans fight like shadows and fires, using skill and unity instead of mere pride. No voice dared raise insult again. Humanity had not just joined the hunt. Humanity had become the hunters that none would ever dismiss again. As the sun climbed higher, Alexandra Kane stood with her soldiers around her. The jungle moon, heavy with scars, bore witness to a new chapter. Across the far reaches of space, a new truth spread like lightning. Humanity, once laughed at and ignored, now stood as the master of survival, crowned by victory and carved into eternity.